It's been a very long time, and I don't miss this place. And so I just ask that you give me grace because it has been such a long time.
Does grace mean more time?
Yes.
How much more, Sonia?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, well, the clock's still going to run, though.
Okay.
So, okay. Fairness to everybody else is waiting, so, okay, go ahead.
As a long-standing member of this community, there was a young lady who spoke earlier about Garden Block 29th Street. That is the community that I landed in Sacramento in 1985, a long, long time ago. And I'm much older than her, and for her to have those experiences that mirror my experiences is a shame. But as a long-standing community member, I stand here with other members who have been extremely diligent stewards of the care of this community and bringing not just experts, but facts supported by research that speaks to the need to not waste more money on expanding the very system that profits off of incarceration and fails to address the reason that cells and cages are the default in the first place. Let me not be remiss in this fact that California is the 4th largest economy in the world, and that this is not a state where we're talking about deficits. We are very resource rich. In that richness, we are still failing on so many levels. And to add a bill, and to not add a bill at the state level to take language like slavery and incarceration out of our state constitution speaks to why we are here today and the profits that are made off of specifically Black bodies. We aren't as progressive of a state as our politics are blue. But I digress. I hope we can all agree that there's a problem with incarceration in this county and in this country. And with that acknowledgement, I am reminded of my great ancestor, Audre Lorde, who reminds me not to use the master's tools to destroy the master's house because it will only bring temporary, at best, solutions to deeper rooted problems of racism and poverty, and the cycle continues. So many experts have come before you urging you to consider more cost-efficient, more care-centered, more trauma-informed, more harm-reducing mechanisms to support and solve a deeper-rooted problem of racism and poverty. And I'm going to keep going back to racism and poverty because after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, laws were intentionally created to fight people who were freed from slavery, which were in poverty with nothing. Hence why the issue is highly connected to racism systemically and structurally. Many, like myself, have come to the conclusion that poverty forces people to consider actions that are deemed criminal, also subjectively criminal. That's up for debate, which oftentimes we can have that argument. Secondarily, we have to address the biggest false narrative that this county is exponentially wanting to address mental health crisis because you have not wanted to solve that problem for decades. Oppositionally, this county has intentionally continued to be a failure in addressing mental health crises in this county. And I just lift up the name Joseph Mann. I can only hope we can agree that people cannot get well in cages. I hope that because you haven't shown that. So I only can hope that. I am an expert in the field of education and equity. I've spent 17 and a half years in a traditional classroom teaching and watching kids get ushered into what was then called a prison to school pipeline, which has been replaced by a cradle to prison pipeline. You make the determination of why that is. But it is obvious that preventative approaches to spending our tax dollars to fund resources and programs that are have more positive impacts and outcomes on the most vulnerable in our community between the ages of 0 and 25. You are failing us. You are failing them. Since it seems you all aren't opposed to and are considering spending over $400 million on a jail facility, may I ask that you spend it on the most vulnerable and more valuable resources? See, the cradle to prison pipeline is real. Thus, an investment in jail facilities only increases and strengthens access to jail cells and cages. It perpetuates the norm and it commodifies the people continuing to historically be fed into a prison industrial complex, which is poverty pimping 101. My last point, and to tie this up with a pretty little bow, is that I further urge you all to address the systemic and structural racism that is foundationally part of the capitalism of Black and brown and poor and mentally challenged bodies that continue to end up in the revolving system of the carceral system. There is no humanity or equity in that, especially considering the bulk of folks incarcerated in our facilities are pretrial, people whom during COVID didn't run from their obligation to appear in court, fought their cases from home, able to work, access resources, and survive. Likewise, the large number of housed in those facilities are suffering from mental health crises, and addressing the crises is more sustainable approach with care. Finally, I would not be my authentic self if I didn't tell you about 18-year-old Sonia, who had a gun put to her head and told that she was going to have her brains blown out if I did not lie down on the ground, as officer at the time, who was current elect Sheriff Cooper, put a gun to my head at age 18 and told me he would blow my brains out. He is a terrorist. He is a harmful person to our community, and he has a record, a track record. I can bring a litany of people that would form a line out of this building of people he has terrorized in the Meadowview, the Oak Park, and the Del Paso Heights areas. But I digress. Let me wrap this up.
Please.
At the time of that gun being pointed to my head, I was an honor roll student at Luther Burbank High School. I was an athlete. I was accepted into Berkeley, Stanford, UCLA, and all the top-notch colleges around this country. I lived in a community that was littered with gang culture, violence, drugs, and crime, but it was exacerbated by officers like Jim Cooper. It's the trauma of racism and poverty. Imagine a world where you won't leave these seats right here that you occupy for another group of people needing to solve the same social ills. Facing these complex issues today, being better stewards of our resources and doing the job of elected officials to protect all of us today is important. My name is Sonia Williams Lewis, and I just wanted to remind you that Black women built this country. We fed it on our breast, and like my foremothers, I am highly educated. I have a BA in history and psychology, a master's degree in education, and I don't come to this podium ignorant of the fact that this is intentionally designed to keep the have-nots from having not. I am a member of Decarcerate Sacramento. I'm a former chapter lead with BLM Sacramento. I'm a founder and CEO of a company here in this county. I am a founder and executive director of a nonprofit. I am a member of the African American Advisory Board for the Sacramento City Unified School District. I'm an author of a book called Monsters and Aliens, and there are monsters in this room. Monsters are people who know that they have the power and they choose to harm the aliens who want to help humanity. Based on all of these facts and data associated with incarceration, I beg you to act. And on this one last fact, I am the mother of 6 Black boys, and I want you in your hearts and minds to think about my youngest, who is 10. Make sure that he has every opportunity to thrive. Make sure that his education is prioritized. Make sure that his mental health is addressed. Make sure that the doors of opportunity are wide open for him to run through and be the best version of himself, living, if he chooses to, in the 4th largest economy in the world that is resource rich. Do me this favor, do this community that favor, exceed our expectations today, invest in the preventative measures and center equity and leverage humanity. No more billion-dollar Band-Aids. Don't give us shovels to continue killing ourselves at the roots.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. Reed, and then Monica Madrid is the last one, and then we're going to go to the phones.
I'll put this up there.
3 minutes, Mackenzie.
I know I put it on my phone this time. How weird is that?
I know.
Okay.
Where's your book?
I know, but I was
Yeah,
like, you see me, I'm in group chats. I have to be on technology today. It's really
right.
weird. Okay. Thank God my phones didn't die, you know? Okay, so good evening, board. My name is Mackenzie Wilson, and I am a community organizer with Decarcerate Sacramento. I would also like to say hello to everybody in the room and who's been watching today, even the folks who were misled here by a false narrative of having to build more jail or release felons into our communities. I want to name now that we are all here about the devastation in our communities. We all want safer communities. We all want our community more educated, healthier, better paid, more fed, fed, more resourced, more given, or more access and given choice to access, and and more given access to choice and opportunity, and therefore safer communities. That we actually are not as different as you think, as much as we were portrayed to be. The difference is that we are evidence-based and data-driven and have been a part of this conversation for years and have lived experience of what is actually happening inside of our most vulnerable communities and inside the jail and our survivors of harm. Snapshot of your jail, we've talked about it. 83% is pretrial and legally innocent. I don't care how many times you tell me they're felons or that they have a felony or they're all like fucking, not access to food gives us felonies. Using drugs gives us felonies. Welfare fucking fraud is felonies. Stop talking to me about a felony, okay? So 83% is pretrial and legally innocent. Tell me what the felonies are. 83% is pretrial and legally innocent. 62% of the population suffers from mental health crisis and 42 severe mental health crisis. 40% of the population is in there due to a non-new crime, meaning a warrant or a violation of some arbitrary rule put on them by probation. And working with these folks, it's because they live outside and can't charge their ankle monitors. They live outside and can't charge their ankle monitors and don't have transportation to court and so much more. Stop talking to me about not playing by the rules. 30% of people inside are unhoused and I've heard from so many inside that have been in there just due to homelessness and the anti-camping laws that are unconstitutional because people who live outside are mostly there because they can't afford to live inside. 32% in there due to alcohol and substance use disorder and a mix of it. On any given day, 45% of the population suffers from a combination of substance use and mental health crisis. 40% is black, 70% people of color, 55% in and out in less than 3 days, meaning they should have never been in there in the first place. And because these systems, cops, courts, cages already receive 72% of our general fund and incarcerate 10,000 people per year, it is literally why we don't have services or housing or access to the scale at which we need them. And they don't even deter crime. With numbers and budgets like that, we should be living in the safest county on the goddamn planet. Well, what this is telling us, y'all, is that the jail is the largest form of public housing we have, used to treat our trauma, our mental health, our substance use crisis, our poverty, our houselessness, survival crime, so much more. In this county, we must begin to make radical changes to the ways we address what we call crime and harm. For example, we were told it's okay to spank our children, but studies have proven that doing that will cause trauma to your child that is life-lasting, meaning spanking and force are not deterrents to having us stop doing things, but instead given access to choice and opportunity and being loved, supported, and redirected, really given access to choice and opportunity and being loved, supported, and redirected really fucking works. Today, we absolutely can make a difference in the way we support our community and stop the ways in which we've been punishing each other and perpetuating the generational cycles of harm and austerity put upon us. I am almost done.
Okay. Please.
From the mouths of babes, my son couldn't be here today because he didn't want to have to sit for hours. I asked him, how do you think you get people off the streets and out of tents? And he said, give them housing. When I told him that we're short hundreds of thousands of affordable housing units, he said, build housing and don't charge them much. Actually, he said, don't charge them, but I told them that we're working on housing as a human right. And in the meantime, what can we do now? How do you think that we should support people in mental health crisis and give them hospitals, therapy, resources, and support the people in their lives to know how to, in mental health crisis? He said, give them hospitals, therapy, resources, and support the people in their lives to know how to support them too. I said, how do you support people in using drugs, knowing some people can like them, they've been used as medicine for years, and that addiction is a real disease? And he said, access to doctors and places that will make sure they can use them safely and teach them how. When asked how do we stop people from stealing, he said, give them what they need. I think my son in this community knows people only take when they think they can't have. And if we don't create a culture of being able to ask for what we need or of having access, that, I asked him, how do we stop the violence and people from harming themselves and each other? And he said, to teach each other. What my son is speaking about is the decriminalization of our trauma, years of racism, divestment, the lack of choice and opportunity. And he doesn't even know how metal that is, though I remind him every day. What my son is talking about is giving us food, housing, education, access. And I give thanks for my generation, his generation, and the one after that, because change is coming. And because this would, and how we should have always done things, and because of how we have been, and it hasn't always been in love, it will not be able to beat the fact that folks think the rat race of having to chase paper for our survival and its punishment for not being able to play by the rules when we make up our own or when we're too tired, they're going to know this shit ain't eternal. And evidence of things like housing, education, food access, and access to services being the true solutions to things like harm and homelessness is everywhere. And it's why no matter what, love will win this war. You can't jail or spank away bad behavior, and you definitely can't kill or torture ideas.
Please.
What we can do with $650 million, and I just want to show this. What we can do with $650 million. We never talk about that much money for housing or mental health services or anything else by that matter. What we could do with $650 million and billions over the next 50 years towards evidence-based solutions and preventions and alternatives would make that building obsolete and our community safer than the plans the county is recommending today. And this is not a moment that we can afford to come and tell you that we told you so later. We only get to another day for Sacramento if we start making the right decisions today.
Okay.
And this is the timeline that the county can use to legally meet the consent decree that doesn't look like building a jail.
Okay, thanks, Mackenzie. All right.
If we can get in 5 more minutes, the Carteret Sacramento would better show it to you.
Well, you can send it to us. You can send it to us.
I will. Thank
Okay,
you.
please. Okay. All right.